Back to My Garden, episode 56.
Welcome to Back to My Garden. Discover your passion for gardening. Here's Dave Ledoux.
Attention, garden lovers. Do you want to save time, save money, and have your most amazing garden ever? Receive free tips, strategies, and gardening techniques from passionate gardeners around the world. Join the VIP Club for free today at www.backtomygarden.com/VIP. Discover how to earn your first 500 or your next 500 as a garden blogger. Get my simple 5-step system for creating your own second income doing what you love part-time. Download instantly for free my garden blogger blueprint mind map at www.backtomygarden.com/secret. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world when you listen to this. I'm Dave Ledoux, and welcome to another episode of Back to My Garden. And we're going all the way across the continent to Utah, near Salt Lake City, halfway between Provo and Salt Lake. Jim Teahan is a certified square foot gardener. He's an instructor, and he's passionate about teaching others how to grow their own food. Jim believes that true wealth comes from the earth, and the closer we live to it, the healthier and happier we will be. We got tons to talk about, so without any further ado, welcome to the show, Jim Teahan. Hi, Jim.
How you doing? Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad you're on the show today, and I gave you a brief introduction. Didn't even touch on some of the more interesting parts. We'll go there. I want to hear your stories, Jim, and I know our listeners want to get to know you as well. Take a minute or two and just share with us a little bit about your background and how you got into gardening.
My background, really, if you saw a resume of mine, I used to tell my wife this many, many years ago when I was trying to get a job after I finished playing professional baseball. It was really a sports resume. I mean, sports was my life. I played 3 sports, basketball, baseball, and football. Did it year-round, and I really didn't have breaks between seasons. So that it was my life. I was born in upstate New York, and my parents moved us out to California when I was 12. Kind of a tough age to move, 12, 13 area. And I showed up with the funky clothes that we used to wear in upstate New York and Southern California and was made fun of instantly. And so, I had a really fun time in high school. Left high school, was lucky enough to play at the University of Utah on a football scholarship. When that was done with, I ended up playing professional baseball. And lasted a very short time because of a career-ending injury. And so then, as they say, real life, it was time to decide what I wanted to do when I got older. And I found my way in the healthcare industry, where I've been for 28 years. And that's kind of a rough sketch of me, but I'm a hobby king. That's what my wife calls me. And the whole gardening thing, I think probably started, I started trying to think back when it all started. We had our first house back in 1986, and we had what I would call a pretty small plot of land to grow on. I think it was 3 or 4 feet wide, and it was probably 30 feet long. Not very much room. And, maybe the hobby king just kind of took over in me, but I had some seeds. I just, for grins, I put some stuff in the soil and tilled it up with a tiller and did a lot of work. And lo and behold, something grew. And one of the first thing that grew, I remember it was broccoli. And, I wasn't even a huge broccoli fan. Still, I'm not really a big broccoli fan, but I planted something, it grew. And, when people ask me where it started, I always think about that first broccoli plant. And from there, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it never got to be a big garden. We ended up moving to Connecticut after a few years and had an even smaller garden. But that's kind of where it all started, and I'm just fascinated with seeds. Something very, very small. You put it in the soil, and you water it, you take care of it, and all it wants to do is grow. And as it turns out, they grow things that are pretty tasty. And that's kind of evolved over the course of 3 decades now, and it's been really fun. I don't want to say it's an overwhelming hobby, but it's a pretty intense hobby for me.
Fantastic. You've given us a lot to work with there, Jim. Now, as Jim and I visit and chat, we have listeners driving in their cars. Make sure you keep both hands on the wheel. You don't have to take notes. I'll be taking notes throughout the call. And I'll put all the links, resources, and websites that Jim recommends on the blog at BackToMyGarden.com. Make sure you follow Jim on Twitter. He's at The Wealthy Earth, and he has a fantastic website at www.thewealthyearth.com. Now, you mentioned your first garden, broccoli, and it sounded like a long jump pit, like 3 feet wide and 30 feet long.
Yeah.
I like it when gardeners share stories of things going horribly wrong in the garden. Did you plant anything when you were first getting started that didn't grow, or did you kill anything by accident?
No, not the first year. All that started after the first year, when I learned what happens when you don't amend your soil, and you have a great first garden the first year, and the second year the thing just stinks. I mean, things are turning yellow, things are stunted, nothing's growing, half of the things only come up. And so I went through that early on, probably by at year 2 or 3, and I went through the normal things that most gardeners go through and all the frustrations. I actually have gone through all those myself. Found a method that I don't have to worry about that anymore with, but yeah, I certainly had some failures starting out. And like I said, it started on a whim. I just had some seeds available, and what's this? Some broccoli seeds. Does it really work? And so I really didn't know anything about gardening. Sometimes I still think I don't, but things just want to grow. You know, it's amazing to me, those little round things. Put them in soil and water them, take care of them, and it turns out well usually.
Now, Jim, you've had gardens in different states, which means different zones.
Yeah.
In Utah, where you are, very unique climate. You got that mountain effect. What kind of a season did you have in Utah this year?
We had a traditional season. Right now we're having a lot of rain. This past winter, it was cold. Last winter we had the coldest winter, I think they said, in 50 plus years. And that was an experience if you're a 4-season gardener, which I am. And I think that was the third year I've been able to garden through all 4 seasons. And it presented some challenges, but I learned a lot. And that's some of the things that I do. I actually have classes at my home. I teach classes at a place that you're probably familiar with since you visit here often, called Thanksgiving Point. And, for me, I'm really kind of surprised that more people, especially with inflation, food has gotten very, very expensive. I'm just kind of really surprised that people don't learn how to grow at least some of their own food, and maybe a whole lot more than that. And I think a lot of it is just a little fear of the unknown. Maybe they think they don't know enough to grow this or grow that. And a lot of it is trial and error, but you can get some pretty good information from friends who have been successful. And so that was kind of like my shortcut to having success. I found a great guy who got me there quickly.
This is a perfect segue, because you had hinted at this method, and I was going to be a smart aleck and say, well, that's all we have time for, folks. We can't talk about the wonderful method, but it's something I'm familiar with because that's how we garden. Talk about how your gardening life changed, and especially, I know you love to teach. I know it's had an impact on your a second career or third career.
It is. It's actually built up to be a little business, and hopefully, that little will change to big at some point. And you don't want to make it all about money, but I'm heading into the retirement years, so I want to look at something I can do. I never really looked forward to the day that I was retired. I want to do something. I want to work. But I think I went through all the traditional frustrations that home gardeners had, and one of the earliest lessons I learned was farming is a whole lot different than gardening, especially us home gardeners. And you don't have to have 3 feet between rows when the seed packet says 3 inches between plants. That doesn't make any sense. But you have to have those in traditional gardens, those big wide areas, so they can weed and things like that. Well, I didn't want to weed. And as I mentioned, this first garden I had, and it turned out pretty good. I mean, I still struggled. The biggest thing that I had to do was same thing that normal traditional row gardeners have to do with that is soil and weeding. And the beginning of the year is fine. Spring season, beehive of activity and nursing stores and gardens, community centers. But by about July 1st, when the vacations kick in and football and baseball and soccer and all the games are being played, that place starts to get pretty messy back there. Certainly by August 1st, it's a disaster. And by Labor Day, it's kind of, well, honey, tear it up and we'll do it all again next year. And they do the exact same thing, get the exact same results. Well, back in, I would consider myself a successful traditional rogue gardener. I learned pretty quickly, what worked and what didn't. And I did that for about 10 years. We moved out to the place we're at right now in Draper, Utah, and we had a son who had really a life-threatening asthma attack, and pretty scary. And he ended up being allergic to a whole lot. I always tell people it's everything under the sun, but I know he could have three things. He could have potatoes and rice. He actually could have beef and pork. And after that, we're getting low. I mean, it was that bad. Well, one of the things that you get with asthma is this eczema, itching all over the place. And his skin was a mess. And, we would put all kinds of topical things on it. And my wife had found out that a certain kind of squash, there's a banana squash, I think it's vitamin D. I might be wrong about that, but I think it was vitamin D. Very good for your skin. Well, we started buying banana squash at the store, and it helped his skin. I mean, it was visibly apparent that it was good for him. Soon thereafter, we had a visit from one of my neighbors who delivered one of those big tubs, it's got the ropes on the end you buy at Kmart and Shop, of banana squash. And I said, Holly, what are you doing? Did you grow all this? Yeah, I grew all of it, and I gave a bunch of the neighbors. And I said to my wife, I can't believe she grew all this, and she gave it all to our friends and neighbors around here too? Yep. Well, fast forward a little bit, her and I ended up having a garden competition. Now, she didn't know about it, but I told my wife she's not going to beat me. And I'd see her during the week, and she'd say smart aleck things like, this is the second week in February. Hey, Jim, you got your lettuce in? And I'd look at her and say, what are you, nuts? You can't grow anything out here in February. It's too cold. We're not even close to the beginning of spring. Well, she wanted to come over and look at my garden a few weeks later. And of course, at that time I had rototilled. It was too early. It was a wet, sloppy, gooey mess out there because we hadn't come out of really the end of winter yet. Her garden is up and running. She's got no weeds. She's got all kinds of things actively growing. And I bought all these things, and I started planting like a mad dog to make it look like I could keep up with her. After 2 seasons, Dave, it was apparent I couldn't keep up with it. I threw the towel in, and I said, tell me about what you're doing. She said, I'm a square-foot gardener. I said, what's that? She told me a little bit about it. I just happened to go down to Thanksgiving Point, kind of late summer, 15 years ago, and I ran into an older fella by the name of Mel Bartholomew, who was there teaching at the time. And he was putting things kind of away towards the end of the season, and it was like a match made in heaven almost, because we struck it off quickly, and he taught me the system. He taught me everything he knew, or he's a pretty smart guy. He's actually an engineer, and that whole event. As I mentioned, they call me a hobby king, but I think the number one hobby I have is really gardening. It's really become quite big, and as I mentioned, right now it's gotten to the point where it fed our family really well here for all the years as our kids were growing up. Now we're empty nesters. By the way, it's not fun. I do not enjoy it at all. But several years ago actually, I asked my wife if she could help me start harvesting things back there in the garden because we couldn't keep up with everything. I was throwing a lot of things away, and finally I said, Karine, you better help me with that stuff back there, or else I'm just going to sell it. And she said, oh, no one's going to buy that stuff. It's all right. On a whim, I put an ad in the newspaper, a KSL, a free ad, and I had advertised for free produce for sale. I had 18 people the first day.
Wow.
I didn't have room to grow for 18 people. I only did it for one person that particular year. It's gotten a little bit bigger, but it's 148 square feet. Now it's 160 square feet. Found another 12 feet to go. I can feed 5, 6, 7 people, and that's really about it. And that's what I do. So I grow for our family, and then I grow for other folks who pay me, I want to say handsomely, but when you do the per hour thing, washing and harvesting and cleaning and delivery, which I do, it turns out to be, a little bit above minimum wage, but it's fun. And the people's faces when you deliver they're expecting basket of 7 or 8 or 9 different things that have just been harvested within the last 2 hours. It's just kind of fun to see that whole facial expression. There's Jim, here he comes. and then they start looking through your basket to see what's new this week. So it's really, really been fun. And for me, Square Foot Gardening eliminated all the drudgery of gardening as I once knew. Lots of digging, amending the soil like crazy, weeding like crazy. All that stuff is gone. It doesn't use a fraction of the water I used to use in the old garden. So it's really, really been fun for me. And right now, after we're done, I'll go out there and plant a few things. And I'm still planting. I'll go all year this year as well. And we'll have some delicious stuff coming up here in about 6 or 8 weeks.
You're going to put in your fall garden. What does that look like for you guys, your fall garden?
My fall garden's already in, and now as I'm harvesting lettuce, which it's a little harder to get lettuce to go through the hard winters we have. It withstands a few freezes, but after that, it's not so much. Right now, my fall garden is the traditional things that you would think about growing in spring. So you got your radishes out there, you've got lots of spinach, you've got chard, things, a lot of the greens. But now, and I've been actually doing this for the last, 4 weeks maybe, I'm planting for a winter garden. Actually, things are going to grow. They get to the point where here November 14th is the date in Utah in Zone 6B where things stop growing, they hibernate, and they just become your refrigerator until you're ready to eat your things out in your garden. And that's how I kind of approach it.
I'm having trouble wrapping my brain around a winter garden because I know Snowbird gets 56 feet of snow.
Yeah.
But you have a little bit milder.
Well, we're a little milder than the resorts, only because we're higher and they obviously get more snow. But this goes back to the whole premise of farming is a lot different than what us home gardeners want to do. And I remember Mel Bartholomew made this comment to me. He said, when you minimize the size of your gardens, everything changes. And I thought about that, and first I thought, what the heck's he talking about? You minimize the size of your gardens and you minimize the size of your yield. But I soon learned what he was talking about is, first of all, you get a huge yield with the square foot garden that no other system can keep up with organically. There's other systems out there that are very, very fine, but you've got to be a chemical engineer to know how to figure them out. But when you've got a garden that's 4x4 or 4x8 or 4x12, it becomes very easy to protect that garden from the elements. And if you can protect your garden from wind, snow, rain, if you can do that, you really do have a different garden. And you can't do that with some of these huge gardens that neighbors have that are really traditional rural gardens, because it would be immensely expensive to put a greenhouse to cover that, and you'd have to heat it, and that would be another expense. So I've just learned a way to cover with minimal expense using PVC and plastic and floating row cover. And the right crops for winter are really the key. You can't grow tomatoes or squash or peppers in winter. It's got to be different things. And that's the other key of the winter garden, is learning the right crops to grow. And it's changed the way we think about winter. I love winter anyways. I'm a cold weather nut. And so when winter comes, my wife and I, and even our kids who visit us every once in a while, hey, where's the Claytonia? So, it's just different things, but we know we're not going to have certain things until the winter comes. So we actually look forward to the winter harvest. So it's really quite fascinating. It's a lot of fun.
Jim, the listeners love, it's not eavesdropping or snooping. They just love to know what other gardeners are growing. This year, what brought you joy, and did anything frustrate you in the garden?
I'll start in reverse order. Anything frustrating? Yeah, the one frustrating thing was, I want to grow more and I don't have room. And really, the other thing that you learn when you minimize the size of your garden, and the square foot garden requires so much less work. By the time that Labor Day weekend, as we talked about earlier, comes around, you look around and say, I haven't done that much this year. I got to keep going. And you have a lot more energy to go. But what was your other question?
What brought you joy, or were there any good surprises?
Yeah, there were. It was some of these things, and I'll just mention a few of them to you. Some of these things, these Asian greens, Tatsoi.
Tatsoi.
Tatsoi, Tatsoi, just a fantastic crop to grow. And, I'd never really grew or tasted pak choy before, but I did this past winter, and it's absolutely delicious. The huge surprise for me is something called Claytonia. just like it sounds. Claytonia. Claytonia, they refer to as miner's lettuce. It's what the gold miners ate on the trails out to California. And, I'm a spinach fan. I love spinach. I always tell people if they haven't had Claytonia before, you're going to like it as much as spinach, maybe more. It's very productive. It loves to freeze and thaw, which is very unique among produce greens. Yeah, unlike things like lettuce, as an example. But yeah, I would say Claytonia was my biggest surprise. It's just a great taste. But then the other things that I'd also grown, kale, cilantro, which a lot of folks grow, but I hadn't a lot of experience growing that. Mizzuno and minatina, all these kind of like weed type of greens are very, very good. A couple of different kinds of beets, bull's blood and red ace beets. A lot of these things I actually kind of learned over the last couple of years reading from Elliot Coleman, kind of like the guru of the 4-season harvest. And all the things that he mentions in there, I think I've grown pretty much every single one of the major ones. And I agree with him. They are delicious, and you'll look forward to winter like you do for summer as far as gardening. At least I do.
This is what I love about the gardening community, is they don't hide or hoard their wisdom. They share it openly, like they want everyone to do well.
Yeah, I really do. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I had a friend many years ago. He was kind of there at the beginning when I was really starting to ramp up, the gardening efforts. And, for me, and I'm not trying to make a political statement at all here, but, when 9/11 hit, I just kind of thought in my mind, what if something really bad happened like that happened and our food supply was shut off? What if our water supply was shut off? That would be problematic. And that's when I really, really got into the squirrel foot garden. And by then I'd done it by 2 or 3 years. But then I started thinking more of self-reliance. And that's the other part that I really kind of love about the squirrel foot garden, because I get so much back there out of so little work. It is some work, but not as much as a traditional garden. But I remember talking to a friend of mine, and he said, I can't believe you like this garden as much as you do. If I want something, I go to the store. And I said to him, I can't believe you're making it that easy. Well, it's been probably 10 years, and that guy has finally said, I think it's time for me to have a garden. And I think it's because of the self-reliance thing. But, the other thing that I don't spend very much time talking about is there's the self-reliant side of it, but there's also the quality, i.e. the taste of the food. Some of these people that I grow vegetables for, I grow for 5 people. And one of them, I remember he wrote me a note at the end of my first season. He was my first customer. And he wrote me a note, and it was like, Jim, listen, I'm 62 or 63. I've been around the block a few times. I just want you to know, after having your lettuce, I just realized that lettuce actually has a taste. Well, that's because we're so used to going down to the store and buying things off the shelves, which is fine. Thank heavens for farmers doing those kind of things. But, can you do it for yourself? Can you do it for your family? And if things got really, really tough, what would your family do for nutrition, for food? So that was also kind of a driving force for me to learn how to do it and produce enough of it where I wouldn't be relying on any other source to feed our family.
Fantastic. Jim, I'm looking at the clock, and our time is rapidly going by quickly.
Yes.
And now's the time in the show when we play a game called 5 Quick Questions. This is your opportunity to share your wisdom and experience with novice gardeners. Are you ready to play?
Okay.
Question number 1. When someone's getting into square foot gardening, what's their number one fear or objection? What kind of excuses do you hear?
Well, if they've never done it before, it's too expensive because of the mix. If they have done it before, it's that stuff doesn't work, and it doesn't work because they haven't followed the rules. I actually wrote an ebook, and it's on my website, geared especially towards that, and it was the success that I've had and the things that get in the way of a square foot garden. And it was only supposed to be 3 or 4 pages because it was easy to talk about, but it ended up being 60 plus pages because it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. But when people don't follow the rules, you've got to have the right soil. Without the right soil, nothing else really matters. And it is, it does cost. And the other thing is, we always talk about square foot gardening uses 90% less water of a traditional garden. Well, people leave classes and they say, I don't need to water my gardens. Well, no, you do need to water your gardens. It's just that because it only takes 80% or 20% of the space, all the space that you normally wouldn't need, you're not watering. So there's where you save your water usage. But I would just say for square foot gardening, I mean, the things that gets in the way are cost, which is a one-time expense. And then for those who have tried it and haven't had success, be honest with yourself and have you follow the rules, and that would be, are you watering correctly? Have you put the soil together? Because it's really hard to have millions of people who have tried it and been very successful, and to have folks out there saying, it doesn't work. Somebody's not telling the truth.
For those of you listening at home, make sure you head over to Jim's site at www.thewealthyearth.com. Check out his resources. See if you want to pick up that ebook. Tap into some of that knowledge and wisdom. Speaking of knowledge and wisdom, number 2, Jim, what is the best gardening advice that you've ever received?
Don't listen to the experts. I walked into a store, and like I said, I do these classes at my house, and we were showing them how to have a winter garden. And I was asking about protection, and we're talking about floating row cover at this point, and the worker, and this isn't a high school worker, this is someone who's been around for a while, the comment was, once it gets below 30 degrees, you can't really rely, you can't really grow anything. So you hear things like that, and she was very adamant about it. And if I didn't know that you could do it, I would have believed her. So you get things like that, and you walk into another store and people will say to you, hey, you can't grow asparagus from seed here in Utah. I said, you can't? No. I said, you should have told me that. And you bring them the picture, and there it is right there, and it started from seed. So I would just say, don't listen to the experts. And there's a lot of poor advice sometimes, I think, out there, and you got to know where to go for people take your advice from people who have done it, is what I would say.
Question number 3. Internet's a good resource for gardeners. Do you have 1 or 2 websites that you would recommend people check out?
Oh, yeah. Pinterest.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to love this one. Smart Football. Just kidding, but I coach a football team. I have a lot of fun doing it. It's another hobby of mine, but I love Pinterest. I spend a lot of time doing that, and that's where I get, a lot of ideas and a lot of exchange of, what they were doing over here that maybe I want to look at.
And your garden this year, you're doing 4x4s. What does your garden look like?
My garden looks like altogether it's got 14 boxes, but they're fine. For instance, I've got a 2x6, I've got a 4x8, I've got a 2x16 and a 4x16. I've got a 3x3, a 4x4, and a 4x1. That's it.
Wow.
But for the winter garden, this year I only have the 64 square feet. I'll just do the 4x16 will be the only one I really do this year. Last year it was 96 square feet, which isn't a lot, and a lot of that is dictated because I lose sun behind a fence line, and part of my garden has no sun in the winter when I need to get something.
That's a super good tip, because what's sunny in spring is not sunny in the...
Yeah. That sun starts setting further and further south, and what you thought was going to get sun in winter, if it doesn't get anything, and you're in zone 6B like we are, it's going to freeze, and it's going to be impossible to grow anything out there.
And you're using frames and plastic?
I use, and they'll see pictures of this on my website. Yeah, it's very simple. I use rebar and I use flexible PVC, and that's your structure basically to hold your floating row cover and your plastic. And I weight it down not with dirt and all kinds of other things like Elliot Coleman says to do, because I've got grass back there in some of my gardens. I can't dig up my grass. I just weight it down with 5-gallon buckets filled with water that turn to ice in the winter, and they probably weigh 30 or 40 pounds apiece. So it's like a big boulder out there at strategic places in my garden, and like I said, I'll go all year round. My garden never really stops.
Fantastic. Man, I hope folks here at home are getting inspired, because we just put our garden to bed, and I just got I'm going to try some experiments. I'm fired up. That's good. Book. Square Foot Gardening is the book. I mean, that's the brand, that's the Kleenex, that's the Xerox, that's the aspirin. It's the Bible of Square Foot Gardening.
It is, and I would say the all-new Square Foot Gardening, the green and white, or the green and yellow one, you can go out and find and buy, very cheap, I might add, the original one back in 1981, I think is when it came out. And it's great. It's got some marvelous things in there, but fortunately, Mel simplified all that stuff. For instance, there was 15 or 20 pages dedicated to soil in the old book. In the new book, you can sum it up in a paragraph. 3 components and that's it. So it's a lot simpler, a lot cleaner.
Do you amend in the fall?
I amend all year round.
Okay.
And I need to. As a 4-season gardener, I'm changing things out there at least 4 times a year. And so I make my own compost, which is another component of the things that I teach people when they come over here. Compost is the greatest thing. You can't buy fertilizer as good as you can make it in your own backyard, coming from things free from your kitchen and your yard, leaves, bushes, trees, branches. And if you do it right, I'll make it in 6 weeks, and people don't believe that. But I've got a weekly YouTube video that I'm putting together as we speak, where you can see here's week 1, here's week 2, and really in 6 weeks I will get a good quality compost that I couldn't come close to buying anywhere.
Let's make sure we promote that. Is the best way to get to your YouTube from your blog?
I think so. Yeah, that post will be up on my blog in a matter of just a couple of weeks, so I'll embed that in one of my posts so people can see it. So that's going to be really fun. I mean, I've had people saying, "When's it going to get here? I need to see it." So
we're doing a barrel composter. We're gonna. That's what we're testing this year. Is we got an old rusty barrel and I'm rolling it down a hill.
One of these things that you roll?
Yeah. No, that's the fancy one. I just got an old barrel and I'm rolling it down the hill full of kitchen scraps.
Did you cut holes in it?
No.
You gotta cut holes in it. Got to get some aeration in there.
I'm the guy that forgot to drill holes in his container garden in the first season. My wife said, "You have a puddle of mud. Did you drill holes in it?" So I'm learning. Okay, so I better drill holes in it.
This is the easiest thing in the world. And you get one successful season of composting under your belt, and you say, "Why haven't I been doing this since day one?"
It's extraordinary when you become aware of how much we waste in the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's all gold. It's good stuff. Where am I? Oh, question 4 is the book. Question 5 is the fun one. In your opinion, what's something that every gardener should try to grow next season?
Lettuce, without question. You can find, and as the comment from one of the customers that I have made to me, I actually was surprised to learn lettuce has a taste. Well, I've got the local companies that I buy from here locally, but the bulk of my things I actually buy from Johnny's Selected Seeds. And the local company is fantastic. I mean, great things that are known to grow here successfully in our region and our zone, but they're limited by variety. For instance, they've got 21 varieties of lettuce. Johnny's got 125. So, and I've grown a lot of them. And you know what? They each do taste different, and there's just something about going out there and picking off one of those heads of lettuce, bringing it in, cleaning it, and eating it. It just tastes better. It's a little sweeter. The texture is different. And people always know they're getting a fresh salad when they come over here and visit us for dinner at our home. So, and then you can get into some of the fancy colors. I mean, there's been years with the square foot garden. It's really fun because my garden is, redwood, and the grid that you're familiar with, I paint white. And then I'll take a 4x4 and I'll make a checkerboard out of it with all different kinds of colors of lettuce. And people walk back there and not only is it good taste, and hey, it looks pretty good as well. So it's a lot of fun, but I would say lettuce is an absolute must.
On an aside, when you're picking lettuce for your own use, do you have a technique or a tip? Do you just rip it out? Do you cut it across? Do you take the outside? Do you have your own personal style?
I do, but it's driven by, what I do for business. For our home, I want it to last a long time, so I will snip 3 or 4 leaves from the outer edge of several different kinds of lettuce. And that means you're going to have a lettuce every night that doesn't ever really taste the same as you had the night before. So that's the good thing. The other good thing is it lasts you a little longer. But for customers that I grow for, I pull the whole head out and they get 4 heads of lettuce in their basket along with all the other things. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do.
Man, our time has absolutely flown by. Folks at home, follow Jim on Twitter at The Wealthy Earth. Subscribe to his YouTube channel and go to his blog and share his content and embrace it. And can people reach out to you, Jim, on Twitter?
Sure, and they can find me on Facebook as well. I think I probably might be more active on Facebook than I am on any other social media. And it's The Wealthy Earth there, too.
Yeah, and the good brand.
Yeah, my wife found that. That's my wife's brainchild. And you know what? I get a lot of comments. maybe not so much about the garden, but the name. I'm just kidding. I get a lot of comments about the garden, but the name is really kind of it's unique, and I love it. So.
You've been a phenomenal guest. I want to give you the last word to the listeners today, Jim. Can you leave our listeners with either a pearl of wisdom or a note of encouragement?
I think I'll go with a note of encouragement. And I would say, learn how to grow your own food. I mean, it's the self-reliant aspect is one thing that you can think about. The taste is another thing. The other thing we talk about is it saves you money. You go and spend $2.50 for a head of lettuce these days when you can buy a whole packet of lettuce seeds. It's got 1,000 seeds in it for $2. You can kind of see how you can start saving a lot of money, and you eat a whole lot healthier. And I promise, when you start pulling those heads of lettuce out and start eating them right away at your dinner tables, the kids who said they wouldn't eat lettuce, it's going to spoil them like it did for our kids, and they won't want to have anybody else's lettuce. They will refuse to eat lettuce at the stores because they're used to what you're doing in the gardens, and it makes you feel happy because you're feeding your family and you're doing it in a good way. It's very nutritious and it tastes good. You get kids to eat vegetables and lettuces and you're doing something right.
Tremendous. Thanks for being on the show, Jim.
All right, Dave.